Hey guys, I'm Jake from Cryonaut Media and Cryosion. Thanks for joining me today. We're using Ableton Live 10 Beta. If you've been following it, you know there's a lot of new devices there, and we're going to get into the new one right after this. If you watched the last video, you saw that we went over the new pedal device and all the distortion that it can bring and how great it can make your sounds become. Well, today we're going to go over the new Echo device. And if you're like me, when you first saw this, you probably thought, well, okay, it's another delay. Great. We already have like 3 or 4 other ones. Why do we need one more? Well, once you get into this, you'll see that this is a lot more than a delay. It has reverb. It has modulation effects over here. It has all kinds of other character, like sidechaining kinds of sounds, noise, more modulation, different kinds of delay. There is so much to this device. I'm not even going to call it really a delay because it really is an echo. You know, anything that will provide an echo or repeating your sound, this could probably do. So if you combine all the other delays and your reverb and even some other little things, then you may come close to this device. It is just awesome. So to get started, we're going to throw on analog again. And I just love using analog because it's a simple synth, it really sounds good, and it comes default with a lot of different Ableton Live versions. It's also really light on the CPU, so instead of adding in something like Serum, which can take up a lot more CPU, this one is super easy to use on your computer. So even if you have a weak computer, analog will work fine with it. Now onto Echo. This is going to be a lot better for pluck type sounds. So that's what we're going to do starting out. We're going to just make that even more of a pluck. I'm gonna change that to a square wave because I like it a little bit better, and shorten up the decay. All right, so that's our default sound right now. Not too bad. Once we add the default echo patch, here we go. This is what we have now. So it's just a simple delay right now, but what's really cool about it is, one, you can separate the left and right channel with this button right here, and you can have them decaying at different sounds, which immediately provides a lot more of an interesting sound. You have the sync button here, so you can go milliseconds, or you can just keep it with your bar there. A couple other options here for what kind of rhythm you want to use, or like time signature. You have a delay offset. So if you wanted to offset your delay, you know, kind of some swing to it, you can do that, and you can just play with it to see what you like the best. Now, a really interesting feature here is this input knob. This allows you to turn down the incoming signal. So let's say you have analog over here with a bunch of other effects. Maybe it's pretty loud, but sometimes you don't have a volume output or like any way to turn down the signal from the previous device. This allows you to turn that down before it comes into here, because if you aren't familiar with delay and echoing kind of devices, they tend to amplify the sound potentially a lot. So by bringing this down, it's going to help alleviate a lot of issues of clipping or just things getting way out of control and blowing speakers, hurting your ears. So definitely keep an eye on this. Feedback is the same as everything else. How much of the sound is going to get fed back into this device to repeat again and again and again. And again, another interesting thing is this goes down to 0% so that it plays through one time and stops. So this outer ring is like the source, the original one, and then how many times it repeats after that. And most of the time these things go up to 100%. Well, this one goes to 150%. And that is insane. I mean, I'm going to play a sound right now. I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but I've done this before, and it just goes into a feedback loop, which just creates chaos and gets louder and louder and louder until it just is a solid noise and destroys everything. So I may have to disable this really quick. Yeah. So that's how that works. If you just play a sound, it's going to play it over and over until it just grows and grows and grows, which is actually really cool, as you just saw, but you have to be super careful with it and make sure you turn that thing off before it gets too loud. But for short things where you just play a quiet sound and it builds up, potentially really cool. Now over here we can add some reverb. Hopefully you know what reverb does. It makes it kind of feel like it's in a space, in a room of some kind. And that can be really cool when combined with delay. And then down here we have pre, post, and feedback, which affects the reverb. Do you want the reverb to be applied before it gets delayed or after all the delay happens? Or do you want the reverb to get fed back through too? And this is where it gets really dangerous. Probably never do this. Don't use feedback and put this feedback over 100%, because that's when it just gets crazy loud and bad. And I'm not saying that so that you'll go and try it. Like, you try it, but be very careful with it, and then don't use it very often. Decay is how long it takes the reverb to decay. So you don't have a whole lot of options to mess with the reverb here, but this is the one main one that you'll use on how long the reverb tail goes for. Down here we have stereo, ping pong, and mid and side, which is kind of your different modes for your delay. The stereo one is the same as your other delays over here, except for the ping pong delay, which is right here. And this just bounces it back and forth between the left and right channels. So I like this sound a lot, but the stereo in this particular plugin is really cool as well. Then you have mid and side, which I've not seen before in a delay kind of plugin, but basically your middle channel has a different rate of delay than the far sides. So everything in the middle is different from the outside, left and right. Now, this can get really cool if you have a sound that pans, left to right and middle. The delay sound will actually change from the extreme left and right into the middle. And you'll see over here that these have changed now to mid and side as opposed to left and right. So everything changes with that. But this is just a really cool option, depending on what kind of sounds you're making and where you put them in the frequency spectrum and left and right and all that, the pan. And then finally over here we have the stereo. Again, how much width it's going to have overall as a sound, not even paying attention to anything you're doing in here. Your output, how loud it's going to be going out of the device. And then your dry wet knob, which again is how much of the affected signal here is going to be output versus the signal that came into this device, so the dry sound. Then down here you also have a little filter with two poles, I guess you'd call them. You have a low pass and a high pass. You can change the frequency and resonance for each one. You can turn it off. So that's the echo tab. Over here in modulation, you have little LFOs. Now these side things are not going to change between these tabs. It's only what's in this little screen. So in here, you have basically two different little LFOs going on. You can change the waveform of each. And over here, you can have it synced or by hertz. And then the phase is how much offset they are from each other. So that can just give you a really cool sound. Then over here, you have how much of it is going to affect the delay or the filter, which is turned off now. So if we turn it back on, then you can affect the filter. And then just the mix. Then in here, you can have how much this affects the delay, which will be like these rates. So basically the delays or the rate will be moving with the LFO. So it can be interesting. It can be difficult to get right, but it can be interesting. And then we have the filter, which right now looks like that. As we bring that up, you can kind of hear the cutoff is getting moved up, or like the amount and cutoff is getting moved with this LFO. So this is a very useful feature to give a lot of movement to your sounds and just not have them sound all boring and just have delay. Who wants just delay? I want to modulate the filter. This can be really cool just to even add another layer to your sounds of movement and modulation. So finally we have the character tab over here with gate, ducking, wobble, and noise. And then this little button down here, which I'll get to in a second. So gate will not let the sound come through at all unless it goes above this threshold. So with the threshold at 0, until the sound goes above 0, there won't be any delay. And hopefully you're not going above 0, because that means that you're clipping, and that's not good. But as we lower this, now you hear we've crossed that threshold, so the delay comes through. Can be useful if you are going to be changing the volume of your sounds, like if you're playing quietly, you don't want delay, but when you play loud, you do, stuff like that. It can be kind of tricky with some MIDI devices. You don't always have control over that, but for something like drums, or if you're playing a live instrument, this can be really helpful. Now we have ducking, which is kind of the opposite of that. This is going to sound like a sidechain compression kind of a sound. Right now it's not doing anything because the sound is not passing the threshold. Once you lower the threshold, whenever the sound goes above this, it's going to get brought back down, and then with the release is how fast it's going to come back to the original sound. So it can be really useful once you have a lot going on. It's kind of hard to hear. With just the one instrument, you can't really hear it too well. But once you have other things going on, you can hear this come in a bit more clear. Now, wobble is another interesting way to modulate your sound. And when we bring this up, you'll start to hear it. So it kind of wobbles the pitch, you can hear, and which has an interesting sound, and then the morph makes it like even more of a wobble, and not just big sweeping ones, but really fast, kind of really interesting sounds. I'll just leave it at that. And then we have the noise, and that just adds noise. And you can hear as I brought this up, there's now just a noise playing in the background that's being modulated over here by the filter. And then so the morph affects the noise as well, kind of like the morph did over here. I have a whole separate video on just this little feature here because it's really cool that you can create these atmospheric sounds without any other device. You don't even need a source kind of signal coming in. The noise will self-oscillate to create that sound. So I'll put that in the description or link it or something. Now, the repitch is kind of an interesting thing. If you're old enough to have ever used, or fortunate enough to have ever used a physical delay device, like a tape delay or something, this kind of emulates that, because when you play a sound and then change the rate of the delay, it pitches up or down depending on what you're doing. You can hear that better once we link these two together. Now if we turn that off and then play a sound, it doesn't pitch with the sound, it just changes the rate that it's being delayed by. So depending on what you want, this is an interesting feature either way. I can see good uses for either option there. So that's the Echo device. There's a lot to it, so this is a little bit of a longer video. Thanks for sticking there if you're still watching. I'm really excited to use this. I'm going to use this thing all the time. I probably won't use the other plugins at all anymore. So thanks for watching, guys. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe if you want to see more Ableton Live 10 stuff coming up. And below, leave a comment on what you think is the best use for this Echo device. And let me know if you're excited to use Ableton Live 10, or if you're already using the beta. So again, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.